All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Parsha Review Podcast. It's so wonderful to be here together. This week's Parsha is Parshas Matos and Parshas Mas'ei. This week's Torah portion is two Torah portions combined, which will conclude the book of Numbers as soon as we're done at the end of this week's Torah reading, Shabbos morning, respectively, in our own synagogues, each one around the world. We will have completed the fourth book of the Torah, the book of Numbers. And next week, God willing, we begin the book of Deuteronomy. So it's important for us to understand just a little bit of what's going on in this week's Parsha. And before we do that, I just want to just give a disclaimer, not a disclaimer, but just an understanding that we're finishing now really the fourth book of the Torah, but the book that deals with the most crisis the Jewish people have dealt with in our history, because we had so many issues that befell the Jewish people. We had the spies, we had the complainers, we had the death of Miriam, the death of Aaron, we had Moshe hitting the rock instead of speaking to the rock. We had Korach, we had the Baal Peor, the serving the idols. We had the relationships with the Midianite women. It was a mess. It was a mess. And really, these two portions end the book of Numbers, but really, according to many of the commentaries, the next book of the Torah, which is Deuteronomy, is a review of the entire Torah. What does it mean, a review? It means everything that the Jewish people learned the last 40 years from Exodus from Egypt all the way till they're about to enter into the land of Israel is going to be reviewed. They learned a lot. We're going to have a lot of new commandments that are going to be introduced as well. But by and large, what we're going to see in the book of Deuteronomy is going to be a review of all of the commandments that were spoken about previously. Also, the book of Deuteronomy is going to be the last 36 days of Moshe's life. So Moses, this is the last 36 days. That's it. The whole book of Deuteronomy is 36 days, which is really phenomenal, because we see that from the beginning of Moshe's life, which is the first portion in the book of Exodus, throughout the entire book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, the book of Numbers, and the book of Deuteronomy is a total of 120 years. While the book of Genesis, forget the book, the first portion of the book of Genesis is almost 2,000 years. It's 1,100 years. And then the next portion, the portion of Noah, is another 1,000 years. And then it's from Abraham till the end of Jacob's life, which is the grandfather of Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's it. That's the next 10 portions. So we have to understand that the book of the Torah is not a book of stories. The book of the Torah is not just a book of laws. It's a book of life. It's called a book of life. Torah's Chaim. So it's a book which tells us how to live life. So we have to look at every Torah portion with the lens, with the understanding. This is God instructing us how to live life, how to maximize life. Just this afternoon, I met with a friend who's been struggling somewhat with his own path, understanding what his life is, what his mission is. And he said to me, what's the difference between religion and spirituality? You see, there are many, I'm allergic to the word religion when it comes to Judaism, because Judaism is not a religion. Judaism is a relationship. Judaism is all about our relationship with God. Now, what is spirituality? And the world is very into spirituality today. You see people who are doing mindfulness, people who are dealing with all the other religions as well. But dealing with spirituality, how do we define spirituality? It was a great opportunity for me to crystallize my thoughts on what does spirituality mean. You see, we live a very physical life. We know that. We eat, we drink, we sleep. We deal with a lot of physical things in our lives. But there's something which is beyond the physical life, which is the spirit, the spiritual aspect of life. And that is our connection with God. Our connection with God, we can be very physical and have it linked very closely with our relationship with God. For example, we put a mezuzah on our door to remind us that every time we walk through the doorway, God is with us. Means we're bringing a spiritual consciousness into our existence. Spirituality is taking what's beyond the physical and bringing it into the physical. So putting on tefillin should never be an act. Lighting Shabbos candles should never be an act of just something physical that I'm doing. There should be a spiritual, something which is beyond the physical act that I'm connecting with. So prayer is a very spiritual thing because I'm saying words, but those words can become habitual. They could become regular. They could become just ordinary words that I just repeat again and again and again and again and again, where they have no more meaning. That's why we have to stop and we have to connect with that, with those words, with that act, with that physical act of speaking to God, and make it something which has meaning. Okay? So it's very important for us to recognize that spirituality, what it really means is infusing our actions with meaning. Infusing our actions with meaning. The greatest way to do that is through the guidance of the Almighty, which leads us into our idea on this week's Torah portion. Matos and Mas'ei is dealing with the final travels of the Jewish people right before they're about to enter into the land of Israel. And if you know the journey of how the Jewish people traveled, they basically traveled Egypt, they were in the Sinai Peninsula going around and around, then they get to southern Israel, which isn't really biblically part of the land of Israel. And then they go to the land of Jordan, Ever Yarden, to the what we call Transjordan, right opposite the land of Israel. And that's where they are now going to prepare to enter into the land of Israel through the Jordan side. By the way, there was also a splitting of the Jordan River when the Jewish people entered theirs into the land of Israel. But that's for a different episode. That's for a different discussion, for a different class. We also see in this week's Torah portion that the tribe of Reuven and the tribe of Gad decided that they did not want to enter into the land of Israel with the Jewish people and get their inheritance in the land. They asked Moshe for permission, and half of the tribe of Menashe, they wanted to get their portion of the land on the Jordan side. And what happens there? On the Jordan side, they're going to get their portion. Moshe makes a condition and signs a legal binding contract with them, stating that they can settle their families there, their children, their cattle, but they have to go into the land of Israel. The men need to go into the land of Israel with the Jewish people. They have to conquer the land, and they have to fight the battle with the rest of the Jewish people. And then when they're all settled in the land of Israel, then the tribe of Gad and the tribe of Reuven and half the tribe of Menashe can then go to their homes on the Transjordan side. Okay, that's the end of this week's, further on in this week's Torah portion. But the beginning of Parshas Matos begins with teaching us the laws of oaths. What's an oath? Let's just understand. The Jewish people are standing in the desert. They're traveling from place to place, and they're getting constant instruction from the Almighty of how to conduct their lives. Here's something which is very, very intriguing, I think, to me at least, of the power of speech. Vayidaber Moshe el Rosh Hamatos livnei Yisrael. Moshe spoke. Vayidaber Moshe el Rosh Hamatos livnei Yisrael lemor. Ze hadovar shetziva Hashem. Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel, saying as follows: Ze hadovar. This is the matter that Hashem has commanded. So Moshe, we know, was not allowed to add anything to the Torah. He was not allowed to remove anything from the Torah. The Torah, exactly as it was prescribed by the Almighty, is how it's written in the Torah. Here, Moshe is commanded, these are the words that Hashem told me to tell you. Ish ki yidor neder, a man, if he will make a vow, la Hashem, to Hashem, O hishava shvua lesor isar al nafsho, or swear an oath to establish a prohibition upon himself, lo yachel devoro, he shall not desecrate his word, kechol hayotze mipiv yaseh, according to whatever comes out of his mouth shall he do. It's a very, very interesting thing. God is telling us in this week's Torah portion that we must keep our word. You say something, you've got to fulfill something. Exactly what you say, you need to fulfill. And this is the beginning of Parshas Matos, talks about the whole journey of words, where if someone says something, someone makes a commitment, and then it goes into different types of people, a child, an adult, a husband, a wife, a daughter, a son, etc., etc. The Torah goes on to explaining the responsibilities. Lo yachel devoro. A person is not allowed to desecrate their own word. Me? Who am I? I'm a nobody. Who cares about what I say? Who cares what I say? My words don't carry that much weight. That's not true. In the Almighty's world, in God's world, your word is everything. Your word is everything. And if your word is everything, God expects you to fulfill your word. I didn't make an oath. I didn't make a promise. Well, you said something. So it says, Lo yachel devaro. Any word that you say something, you got to fulfill it. You got to fulfill it. Ein lo lachalas diburo. A person is not allowed to desecrate his own words. But a person has to fulfill whatever he says. Even if it's not in a term of, I promise, I swear, this is an oath. Person says something, they have to deliver. You know, there's a great story that's told about one of the great rabbis, Rabbi Siegel from Manchester of blessed memory. He once came to the United States for a wedding, and his host that was hosting him also was heading to the same wedding that he was going to. He came specially for this wedding to the United States. I guess it was a family or a close student. And it was very special, a great, beautiful wedding. And before the end of the wedding, well before the end of the wedding, Rabbi Siegel says to his host, he says, if you don't mind, I need to go home now. So the man's like, but he says, but you stay by the wedding. It looks like you still want to be here for longer. I'm going to go. I'm going to take a cab home. I'll take a cab home. It's not a big deal. Okay. And the rabbi did that. The rabbi went. So the next morning, the host asks the rabbi, he says, I don't understand. You came specially from Manchester for this wedding. Why did you stay till the end? You should have, what was your rush to leave? So he says, I'll be honest with you. He says, if you remember, before we left the house, your son said that he didn't want to be home alone without anybody. And you told him, don't worry, we'll be home before midnight. Don't worry, we'll be home before midnight. Meaning by then he'll be sleeping. I don't know what the father meant, what the host meant. By then, it's not going to be a problem. He says, I looked at my watch and I realized it was soon going to be midnight. There was still a lot of the wedding to celebrate. So I didn't want your words to not be heeded. So I decided, you enjoy the wedding and I'll be with your son. So that way, your word is a word. And I think this is such a remarkable story because it's something that in parenting, the world of parenting, if you go to educational classes for parents, one of the things that they'll tell you is that, or I hope they do, they should at least, is that when you tell children something, you must follow through. And the quicker, the better. Because you can't say, you know what, I'm gonna do this or that for your child, and I meant that it'll be in 6 months from now or a year from now. You tell them you're going to buy them a treat. It should be the quicker the better, so that children learn the value of the words. Words are very, sometimes you can wonder, how is it possible that someone can say something which is just patently false? How can they say that? Most likely in their education, they were told things and it wasn't followed through. It is so crucial. It is so crucial that when we speak words, those words carry weight. Those words carry weight. And we need to fulfill those words. The Torah is telling us, oaths and vows, there's a way to nullify them. There's a way to get them, but I made a promise. I can't fulfill it. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to nullify that. That you can do. But generally speaking, the words we say, you make a commitment, you got to follow through on it. And if a person can't, there's a special process to nullify it. But a person has to be careful not to make a promise if they're not going to fulfill it on any level. There's a story that's told about Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel, who was the leader of the Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem. I had the great privilege of learning in his yeshiva. Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel was a very, very, very holy man. Just so that you understand how great he is. I've said this story before. It's one of my favorite stories in the world. One of my favorite stories. Okay, and then I'll get to the story that refers to the topic of truth that we're talking about. But while we're talking about Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel, I have to share this other story. A group of Fortune 500 Jewish executives took a travel to Israel. I've said the story recently in one of the classes, so forgive me if you're hearing it again. They came to Israel and they traveled around. They made partnerships with Israeli startup companies. It was really an amazing thing. One of the participants in that trip was Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks. Nice Jewish man. And what was incredible about this trip is that they went, all 20 executives, all Fortune 500 CEOs, they went to Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel's house. Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel is the head of the largest yeshiva in the world. And his house is very unimpressive. I was in his house. I was in his dining room when I was wanting to get into his yeshiva. So I had to come with a letter written by my grandfather as like a sort of a letter of recommendation, saying that I wasn't going to tear apart and burn down his building, right? So my grandfather wrote me a letter of recommendation, and I came to meet Rabbi Nosson Tzvi, who was like a holy, holy man, like you can't imagine. And just being in his presence, and he read the letter and he said, "Welcome to the yeshiva," and it was very special. In any event, these 20 CEOs are in his house. Now, you have to understand that there was something unique about Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel, is that he had advanced stage Parkinson's. And he was shaking very, very, his tremors were very, very severe. And it sometimes made people a little uncomfortable being around him, because it was visible that he wasn't in control of his movements. But his brain was sharp. He was clear like a whistle. It was amazing. He gave lectures in Torah. His Torah lectures were like brilliant. He spoke clearly, but his movements were a little bit uncomfortable for those sitting around him. These 20 CEOs are sitting around his dining room table, and he walks into the room. They all stand up for him, and they see how challenged his movements are. He sits down, and nobody wants to look at him. Nobody wants to look. All these 20 CEOs there, it's uncomfortable. See, he bangs on the table, and he says, "Look at me." They all turn to him. He says, "I want you to answer me. Why were so many Jews saved from the Holocaust?" It doesn't make any sense why even one was saved. We didn't have a militia. We didn't have weapons. How How is it? I have 3 grandparents who are survivors. 3 of my grandparents are survivors. How did they make it out? 2 of them were in Auschwitz. Not many people made it out of Auschwitz. He asked, how is it that so many were saved from the Holocaust? And they went around the table, and each one of these CEOs shared their idea, their thoughts as to why so many did make it out. So he said, let me share with you my thought. He said, when there were 5 people in a barracks, and I was in one of those barracks, by the way, I went in, I said, I want to be laying where my grandmother was laying. It's not very pleasant. It's not very comfortable. It's like, think of the most uncomfortable plank of wood you've ever been on. And it's like only about 2 feet above the next barracks that's right on top of it. Right? It's like a bunk bed, but without a mattress. And without a blanket. You'd have 5 people, you'd have 1 blanket, maybe 6 people on one bunk bed and 1 blanket, if you got one. And it was cold. I was there at the end of March, and it was so bitter cold. It was so bitter cold. The end of March. It wasn't December time. It wasn't in the middle of winter. It was. I mean, there's no insulation. There was no heating there. You're talking about unbelievable. He said, Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel said, when there were 5 people and there was only 1 blanket, instead of people saying, I want the blanket to cover me, everyone was fighting to push it onto the other person. You cover yourself with the blanket. And the other one was saying, no, you cover yourself with the blanket. He says, you know what happened? The blanket fit for everyone. Everybody wanted to share the blanket. See, he turned to the CEOs and he says to them, you all have a blanket. Go back to America and share your blanket. You have a blanket. Go share your blanket. They were blown away. Absolutely blown away. Blown away so much so that Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, before he left Israel, said, I want to go back to that rabbi. And he came back to Rabbi Nosson Tzvi's house. And he said, Rabbi Finkel, I'm a multi-billionaire. He took out a checkbook and he signed it and left it blank. A check. He said, Rabbi, fill it out for any amount you want. It won't bounce. Fill it out for any amount. Rabbi Nosson Tzvi took a pen and he put a 1, a 4, a 0, and a 0. $1,400. And he gave it back to him. And he said, across the street, there is a scribe. The scribe, I want you to go to the scribe and I want you to buy yourself a pair of tefillin. He says, that is the greatest gift you can give the Jewish people. The greatest gift, put on tefillin every day. And Matt, I don't know about you, but I know that when Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel passed away a few years ago, there was, I think, $50 million of debt in the yeshiva. Thank God people got together and paid up all that debt, and the yeshiva is even bigger and even greater, and his legacy lives on. Can you imagine you're living with you're talking about anywhere between 10 and 11,000 students in yeshiva. Do you know what that means? You know what the cost of operations a day? It's just like, it's unbelievable. And someone comes to you and gives you a blank check. The only thing you can think of is what's the greatest merit for the person, not for me. Such a selfless person. So back to our story. I think it was worth it. No, Lauren? It was a good story. It's an amazing story. So someone called up Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel and said to him, Rabbi Finkel, I want you to be the sandik. I want you to be the godfather, the person who holds the baby for my baby's bris. Okay? So typically people don't decline that honor. It's interesting. My grandfather always did for family. It was very interesting. My grandfather was a very humble man. But when a family member like myself came to my grandfather and asked him when I had my first son, I said, Saba, can you please be the sandik? Can you be the godfather, the one who holds the baby during the bris? So it's the highest honor that you can give for the baby, of course, but also for the at the bris. This is the highest honor that can be given. So my grandfather immediately asked me, and I knew that this was what he did. He never did it for the grandchildren, for the grandchildren's children, till both the father and the father-in-law of the person both were sandik already. That means that till my father and my father-in-law were the sandik, my grandfather wouldn't do it. So I knew that this was going to happen. So I told my grandmother beforehand, I said, I need some of your help. So I asked my grandfather, and my grandfather said, did your father do the sandik? Did your father-in-law do the sandik? I said, no, this is my oldest child. It's my firstborn. I would like you to be the sandik. He says, no, I can't do it till your father, and meaning his son, and your father-in-law are going to be the sandik. So I said, but Saba, first is, I don't know if I'm going to have another son. I want to have more children, but I don't know if I'm going to have another son. Number two is that he was already 91 years old. He was of age. I don't know how many more opportunities I'm going to have for him to be at a bris. So I said, my father said, I already asked my father, and he said, nope, not if my grandfather's there, you give him. And my father-in-law said the same thing. Nope, my grandfather was a big rabbi, so that obviously. So my grandfather said, in that case, maybe I don't come to the bris. That way one of them will have the honor. My grandmother heard that, and she went crazy. She says, I don't understand. She said, every person comes here to the house and asks you to be a sandik. You don't even know their name, and you accept that honor. Here your grandson is begging you, and you don't want to, you're giving him such a hard time? She says, no. That means like, okay. So my grandmother says, you see? He said, yes, he's going to be the sandik. She knew how to interpret his little news. Either way, he was the sandik, and it was an unbelievable honor. And unfortunately, he was not around by the time my second son was born, but he had already passed away. So it was a fair gamble. And I was later on, my father and my father-in-law were both sandik for different children, different sons that I had. And it was very, very special. But either way, it's a very, very big privilege and a big honor. Of course, for my son, it's a huge honor that my grandfather was his sandik. So either way, someone approached Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel and asked him if he would be sandik. He said, yes, but I have one request. Since he was very ill with advanced stage Parkinson's, he said, I can't really travel far. If you can do it at a hall that's nearby, I'll be able to attend. So they did it. They did it at a hall right down the block from the yeshiva, from where the rabbi lived. And the morning of the bris, the rabbi wasn't feeling well. So the rabbi called the family and said, I apologize, but I'm not feeling well. I cannot be the sandik. I cannot be the one who holds the baby. Okay. A few minutes before the bris, the rabbi calls up the father. Father's shocked. He says, what is the rabbi calling me again? He says, I'm waiting for you downstairs outside my house. She says, you told me you weren't feeling well. He says, yeah, I'm not feeling well to hold the baby for the sandik, but I promised you I was going to be by the bris. I can't not be by the bris. right? He made all the arrangements to, right? I told you that I would come, right? I'm not feeling well enough to hold the baby, but I do have to fulfill my word because a word is a word. We see that our sages were so careful. Our sages were so careful that every word that we speak be fulfilled. I can tell you hundreds of stories. There's so many stories, like that the accuracy of their words were so important to them. They said something, they fulfilled that something. Because what is God? What's God's name? God's name is Emet, truth. Hashem Elokechem Emet. Hashem, your God, is truth. That's the essence of God. If we want to have a relationship with God, the number one ingredient we need is truth. The number one ingredient. And if we forego on that truth, we forego, God forbid, on our relationship with God. The most important characteristic, the most important trait that we need to invest in order to be in a world, in a relationship with God, is the trait of truth. The trait of truth. It's such an important. You can't. Yeah, we all know truth is a good thing. Truth is the right thing. It's important. No. It's the essence of who we are. It's the essence. It's an amazing thing that the Torah doesn't. There's no place in the Torah that it says, "I forbid you to lie." It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. It says, distance yourself from falsehood. Midvar sheker tirchak. Why doesn't it just say, lo tishaker, do not lie? It doesn't say that. It says, distance yourself from anything that is false, from all falsehood. It's sort of, perhaps, like a kal vachomer. A kal vachomer is, I tell you the lenient and you learn the more stringent. If you go to a doctor and the doctor says, your diabetes is very, very difficult and don't take a teaspoon of sugar. All right, don't take a teaspoon of sugar. I'll fulfill that. So then you go on your way out, you go buy yourself a big, big, big sugary Slurpee, right? A big Slurpee from 7-Eleven, from one of the. Your spouse tells you, well, didn't the doctor just say not to take a teaspoon? He said a teaspoon. He didn't say a half a cup of sugar. We all know that it's obvious. If he said a teaspoon, it means even a tablespoon. It means even a half a cup of sugar. It means that for sure. If God tells us distance yourself from falsehood, it for sure means don't lie outright. Meaning don't even get close to something that has a little tinge of falsehood. We need to stay away and be so cautious not to even give an impression that won't be fulfilled. And our sages were concerned about that. Our sages were concerned that nobody should get the wrong impression. They were clear about every word that they said, to the point that nobody should get the wrong idea. That's what this week's Torah portion, the beginning of Matos, teaches us. It teaches us the importance of every word we speak. Every word we speak. Lo yachel devaro, kechol hayotz mipiv yaseh. Your words shouldn't be desecrated. Every word that comes out of your mouth, you should fulfill. This is the teaching of the Torah, that God is telling us. On a physical level, we speak words. On a spiritual level, we need to fulfill them. If we want to be in a relationship with God, now it makes sense why the Torah tells us not to steal. Because these are all things of falsehood. These are all things that are introducing foreign spirits into our life, foreign objects. If we want to live a God-connected, a God-centric life, we need to ensure that we fulfill the words that we promise. Even if they're not outright promises, even if it's not an oath, even if it's not I hereby declare and I promise that, I just said the words. I'll be there at 5. Person should be very, very careful to ensure that they fulfill their words that they promise, that they say. Every word. Kechol hayotze mipiv yaseh. Something comes out of your mouth should be fulfilled. My dear friends, have a magnificent Shabbos, and thank you so much.